A powerful singer humiliates a poor cleaner by forcing her to perform, only to discover she's a hidden legend whose voice changes everything in seconds. I need your support, please subscribe my channel. The grand concert hall shimmered under golden lights, every corner alive with anticipation. Crystal chandeliers hung like stars from the ceiling, reflecting elegance and power. Technicians rushed across the stage, adjusting microphones, testing sound, perfecting every detail. This was not just any place, it was where legends performed, where voices turned into memories that lasted forever. At the center of it all stood the famous singer. Dressed in luxury, surrounded by assistants, he carried an aura that demanded attention. Every word he spoke was followed instantly, every request fulfilled without question. His voice echoed through the empty hall as he rehearsed, confident, flawless, admired by everyone present. Everyone, except one person. Near the far corner of the stage, almost blending into the shadows, a young woman quietly moved across the marble floor. With slow, careful steps, she cleaned what others had left behind. Her clothes were simple, her presence unnoticed. People passed by her without a glance, as if she didn't exist at all. She lowered her gaze, focusing only on her work. But there was something different about her. Her movements were gentle, almost rhythmic, as if she followed a silent melody only she could hear. Every now and then, she paused for a second longer than necessary, her eyes drifting toward the stage where the singer stood. Not with admiration, but with something deeper. Something hidden. What if the quietest person in the room had the loudest story? A stage assistant rushed past her, nearly bumping into her shoulder without even apologizing. Another laughed loudly nearby, discussing the singer's fame, his success, his unmatched talent. The cleaner remained silent, her hands gripping the cloth just a little tighter. They don't see me, and maybe it's better that way. She continued wiping the floor, her reflection faintly visible in the polished surface. For a brief moment, she stopped and looked at herself, really looked. Her expression softened, as if she was remembering something, or someone. Then, almost instinctively, her lips moved. No sound came out, but it was clear, she was singing. Not for anyone else. Not for attention. Just a quiet echo of a voice she had buried deep inside. On stage, the famous singer hit a powerful note, and the crew burst into applause. The sound filled the hall, loud and proud. But in the corner, unnoticed, the cleaner's silent melody carried a different kind of emotion, one that no one cared to hear. Two worlds existed in the same room. One filled with applause and recognition. The other wrapped in silence and forgotten dreams. And no one, not a single person, realized how close they were to witnessing something extraordinary. Sometimes, the most powerful stories are hidden behind the quietest faces. The bright lights of the stage grew harsher as rehearsal continued, filling the hall with a sharp, restless energy. The famous singer stepped down from the stage, his expression slightly irritated, as if something around him wasn't meeting his standards. "Why does it still feel dusty here?" he snapped, his voice cutting through the room. The crew immediately fell silent. Eyes shifted nervously until someone pointed toward the far corner. There, the cleaner is still working. All attention turned in the same direction. She froze for a moment, the cloth still in her hand, as she felt dozens of eyes suddenly land on her. Slowly, she looked up, uncertain, unprepared for what was coming next. The singer walked toward her, his polished shoes echoing against the marble floor. Each step carried authority and arrogance. "You," he said, looking her up and down, his tone laced with mockery. "Are you even doing your job properly? Or just pretending to work?" A few crew members chuckled quietly. The cleaner lowered her gaze, her fingers tightening slightly around the cloth. I'm doing my best, sir," she replied softly. "Your best," he repeated with a smirk. "This is your best." The laughter grew louder now. Someone whispered something under their breath, and a few others joined in. The air shifted. What was once a professional space now felt like a stage for humiliation. She stood there, still and silent, absorbing every word. The singer circled around her slowly, as if inspecting something unworthy. "People like you," he continued, "always think being invisible is enough. But even invisibility should have standards." More laughter. Her eyes flickered for a brief second, a quiet pain surfacing before she quickly hid it again. She didn't defend herself. She didn't argue. Because she had learned long ago, Silence was safer. But how much can a person endure before silence begins to break? Just stay quiet. It will pass like it always does. One of the crew members stepped forward, trying to impress the singer. Sir, don't worry. People like her don't understand quality anyway. That sentence landed harder than the laughter. For a moment, her breathing slowed. Her grip loosened. And her eyes, those quiet, unnoticed eyes, carried a depth no one in that room cared to see. The singer shook his head, clearly amused. Unbelievable. Even this place has standards, and yet, he paused, glancing at her one last time with a dismissive smile. We still have this. The room echoed with soft laughter again. And just like that, he turned away. To him, it was nothing more than a moment of entertainment. A passing joke. A reminder of his own importance. But for her, it was something else. It was another wound. Another reminder of how easily people judge what they don't understand. She slowly bent down and continued her work, her movements even quieter now. But something had changed, something small, almost invisible, yet powerful. Because behind that silence, behind that lowered gaze, something was beginning to stir. Sometimes, the deepest pain is hidden behind the quietest silence. The laughter had barely faded when the singer suddenly stopped mid-step, as if an idea had just crossed his mind. A slow, mischievous smile spread across his face as he turned back toward the cleaner. Wait, he said, raising his hand to stop the crew. Let's have some fun. The room instantly grew attentive again. He walked back toward her, his eyes now gleaming with amusement. You've been standing here so quietly, he said, tilting his head. Tell me, can you sing? A few people laughed immediately, already sensing what was coming. The cleaner looked up, confused and slightly alarmed. No, sir. Her voice trembled, unsure how to respond. Oh, come on, he interrupted smoothly. Everyone can sing a little, right? He turned toward the crew. Or is she completely talentless too? More laughter echoed through the hall. She shook her head slightly, her heart beginning to race. This wasn't just a question. It was a trap. I don't sing, she whispered, almost pleading. But the singer wasn't interested in her answer. Perfect, he said, clapping his hands once. Then let's hear it. Before she could react, he gestured toward the stage. Go on. Get up there. The words hit her like a sudden storm. For a moment, she didn't move. Her feet felt heavy, rooted to the ground. All eyes were on her again, but this time, it was different. There was expectation, judgment, entertainment. Was this just a joke to them, or something more cruel? I can't, she said softly, her voice barely audible. The singer's expression hardened slightly. I didn't ask if you can. I told you to do it. The room fell quiet, but not out of respect, out of anticipation. Two crew members stepped forward, gently but firmly guiding her toward the stage. She didn't resist, but every step she took felt heavier than the last. The distance wasn't far, yet it felt endless. Her heart pounded loudly in her chest. The bright stage lights suddenly felt blinding as she stepped onto the platform. The same place where moments ago, greatness had been celebrated, now felt like a place of exposure. She stood at the center, small and uncertain. The singer leaned casually against the stage, watching her like an audience member waiting for a show. Go ahead, he said with a smirk. Sing anything. Soft chuckles filled the room again. Her hands trembled slightly at her sides. Her breathing grew uneven. For a brief second, she closed her eyes, as if trying to escape the moment. Not again. I can't go through this again. A memory flickered behind her closed eyes, something distant, something painful, something she had buried long ago. She opened her eyes slowly. The crowd was still there. The laughter. The judgment. The pressure. Everything was waiting. But something inside her, something fragile yet powerful, began to rise. And for the first time since stepping onto that stage, she lifted her head. Sometimes, the moment meant to break you becomes the moment that reveals you. The hall held its breath. Under the harsh white lights, she stood alone at the center of the stage, small, quiet, almost fragile. The same people who had laughed just moments ago now watched with eager anticipation, waiting for their joke to unfold. The singer leaned back casually, arms crossed, a faint smirk still resting on his face. To him, this was nothing more than entertainment. "Any time," he said lightly. A few soft chuckles echoed again. She didn't move at first. Her fingers curled slightly, her chest rising and falling with uneven breaths. The silence stretched, growing heavier with every passing second. It pressed against her, trying to break her before she even began. Then slowly, she closed her eyes. And in that quiet darkness, everything else disappeared. The laughter, the judgment, the fear. "This is the last time I will stay silent." A soft breath escaped her lips. And then, she sang. Just one note. But it wasn't weak. It wasn't uncertain. It was powerful. The sound rose into the air like something alive, rich, deep, filled with emotion that words could never explain. It didn't just reach the ears, it touched something deeper. The room changed instantly. The faint smiles on people's faces froze. The whispers died mid-sentence. Even the air itself felt different, heavier, charged, as if the entire space had shifted in a single heartbeat. Was this really the same woman they had just laughed at? Her voice grew stronger with each passing second. There was pain in it, but also strength. There was sadness, but also something unbreakable. Every note carried a story, a truth that could not be hidden anymore. A crew member slowly lowered the equipment in his hands, completely lost in the sound. Another took a step closer to the stage, eyes wide with disbelief. The singer stopped smiling. His arms slowly dropped to his sides as his expression changed. The confidence, the arrogance, it all began to fade, replaced by something unfamiliar. Shock. She continued singing, her voice now filling every corner of the hall, echoing against the walls like a memory returning after years of silence. It was no longer just a song. It was a revelation. Tears quietly formed in the eyes of someone in the crowd. Another covered their mouth, unable to process what they were hearing. No one laughed anymore. No one moved. Because in that moment, they understood. They hadn't been watching a joke. They had been standing in front of something extraordinary all along. And they almost missed it. As her final note lingered in the air, the silence that followed was deeper than anything before. Not empty, but full. Full of realization. Full of regret. Full of truth. Sometimes, one moment is enough to change how the world sees you forever. The silence after her final note felt almost sacred. No one dared to speak. No one dared to move. And as the echoes of her voice slowly faded into the high ceiling, something deeper began to unfold, not on the stage, but within the hearts of those watching. Because that voice, it wasn't unfamiliar. It was remembered. A soft whisper broke through the stillness. That voice. I've heard it before. Another followed. It can't be, is it really her? The camera of memory slowly turned backward. Years ago, under the same kind of golden lights, she had stood on a much bigger stage. Crowds filled every seat, cheering, crying, holding onto every note she sang. Her name had once carried weight. Her voice had once ruled hearts. She was not just a singer. She was a legend. Her performances were unforgettable, her songs carried across cities, across lives. People waited for hours just to hear her sing for a few minutes. She had everything: fame, respect, admiration. So what happened? The scene shifted. A quieter room. A hospital bed. The steady, haunting sound of a machine. Her hand holding someone else's, someone she loved deeply. The glow of fame replaced by the shadow of loss. And then, silence. The lights faded from her world, one by one. After that night, she disappeared.
No farewell. No explanation.
No return. The world searched for her voice, but it was gone. Back in the present, the truth settled heavily into the room. She had not lost her talent. She had lost her reason to use it. Her eyes, still calm, held a story that no one had cared to ask about. The same woman they had mocked had once stood where their greatest idol stood. And she had walked away. Why would someone leave everything behind, unless the pain was greater than the fame? I didn't choose silence. Silence chose me. A tear slipped quietly down her cheek, not from weakness, but from memory. From everything she had carried alone for so long. The crew members who once laughed now stood frozen, guilt slowly replacing their earlier amusement. The stage no longer felt like a place of power, it felt like a place of truth. Even the singer, who once stood so confidently above her, now looked smaller, uncertain, shaken. Because the woman he had tried to humiliate was someone the world had once admired and forgotten. But not anymore. Sometimes, the people we overlook are the ones who once carried the world in their voice. The silence in the hall was no longer just shock. It was heavy, uncomfortable, undeniable. Every eye slowly turned toward him. The man who had once stood so confidently, so untouchable, now looked frozen in place. The same stage that had lifted him moments ago now felt like it was pulling him down. His lips parted slightly, but no words came out. For the first time, he didn't know what to say. How do you recover from a moment like this? He looked at her, really looked this time. Not at her clothes. Not at her position. But at her. And what he saw shattered something inside him. The quiet strength in her eyes. The pain she never showed. The voice that carried more truth than his own ever had. His chest tightened. He began, his voice unsteady. He swallowed hard, struggling to find control, but it was already slipping away. I didn't know. The words felt small, weak, almost meaningless in the face of what he had done. A few steps forward, that was all he could manage. The crew watched in complete silence. No one whispered now. No one laughed. Because something rare was happening. The fall of pride. I thought, he continued, his voice breaking slightly, I thought this was just a joke. His eyes dropped for a moment, unable to meet hers. What have I done? The realization hit him all at once, not slowly, not gently, but like a wave he couldn't escape. Every word he had said, every laugh he had encouraged, every moment he had reduced her to nothing. It all came crashing back. And now, there was no way to undo it. I was wrong, he said finally, lifting his gaze again. This time, there was no arrogance left, only regret. Completely wrong. His voice echoed softly in the hall, stripped of its earlier power. I humiliated you, without knowing who you are. Without even trying to understand. A deep breath trembled through him. I'm sorry. The words lingered in the air. Not dramatic. Not loud. But real. And that made them heavier than anything he had said before. He took another step back, as if giving her the space he should have given from the beginning. The distance between them now felt symbolic, the reversal of everything that had just happened. Because the power had shifted. She was no longer the invisible cleaner standing in the corner. And he was no longer the untouchable star. In that moment, he was just a man facing the weight of his own actions. The room remained still, watching, feeling every second stretch. His apology didn't erase the past. But it revealed something important. That even the loudest voices can fall silent, when they finally hear the truth. Sometimes, true strength is not in being admired, but in admitting you were wrong. The hall remained still for a long moment. Not because nothing was happening, but because no one knew how to respond to what they had just witnessed. Then slowly, something changed. A single clap echoed through the room. Then another. And another. Until the silence finally broke into a wave of sound that filled every corner of the grand hall. Standing ovation. It started hesitantly, as if people were afraid they didn't deserve to applaud. But soon, it grew stronger, louder, unstoppable, like emotion finally finding its voice. All eyes were on her now. Not with curiosity. Not with judgment. But with respect. She stood quietly at the center of the stage, overwhelmed by the sound she had once been denied. Her hands trembled slightly, unsure what to do with this moment she had never expected to return. Recognition. For years, she had lived in silence, not because she had nothing to say, but because no one had listened. And now, they were listening. A soft breath escaped her lips. Her eyes shimmered with emotion she had buried for so long. Is this really happening? Or is it just a dream I never dared to have again? The singer stood a few steps away, no longer the center of attention. He didn't speak. He didn't move. He simply watched, quietly accepting the reality that had unfolded in front of him. The crew members who once laughed now stood with lowered heads, some clapping, some simply staring in disbelief at how easily they had misjudged her. Because the truth was simple and painful. They had never asked who she was. The applause continued, not for fame, not for status, but for truth. For talent that had been hidden, dismissed, and nearly destroyed by pride. She finally lifted her gaze. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't look away. Her voice had not just filled the hall. It had awakened something inside every person there. A realization. That greatness doesn't always arrive with attention. Sometimes, it arrives in silence, wearing the simplest face. The singer slowly took another step back, giving her the center of the stage without hesitation. Not as an act of performance, but as an act of respect. This time, no one laughed. No one interrupted. Because everyone understood now. The world had almost lost a voice that it didn't even recognize. And she was still standing. Still singing in the hearts of everyone who had finally learned to listen. As the applause slowly softened, a new feeling settled in the room. Not excitement. Not shock. But awareness. Because from this moment forward, no one would look at silence the same way again. Never underestimate a person who is quiet, because silence often hides the loudest truth. Please subscribe.